Arthur's family truth. I was still wearing the shirt from the funeral when the call came. 7 days after we buried Margaret. Her doctor's name on the screen. I almost didn't answer. I was sitting at the kitchen table with cold coffee and nothing else, staring at her reading glasses on the counter right where she'd left them the morning she collapsed. I hadn't moved them, couldn't bring myself to. I picked up the phone. Arthur. Dr. George Hartley's voice was wrong, too tight. I need you to come to my office right now. There's something in Margaret's blood work that doesn't add up. Come alone. Don't say a word to your daughter or her husband. Your life may depend on this. I sat there for a second. Then I got my keys. My name is Arthur Norwood, 62 years old, retired U.S. Air Force, 24 years of service. I spent those years managing base construction and logistics across 3 continents. I know how to read a situation. I know when something's wrong before anyone says a word. I missed it completely with my own family. Margaret was 59 when she died. We'd been married 37 years. She was the kind of woman who could run a federal judge's personal finances for 15 years without a single error, then come home and still remember to pick up my prescription and call her mother on the way. Sharp, practical, steady. She kept everything running, our accounts, our house, our life. The last 8 months, she wasn't herself, tired all the time, forgetting small things, grabbing the counter when she walked through the kitchen. She told me the tea tasted bitter, metallic, like something was off. I told her it was probably stress, told her to get more sleep. I didn't listen. That's the part I carry. The morning she collapsed, I'd already left the house. The ambulance beat me to the hospital. By the time I walked through those emergency room doors, she was gone. Massive stroke, they said. Significant brain damage. She never regained consciousness. Our daughter Patricia cried so hard she could barely stand. I held her up in that hallway. Her husband Rodney stood behind her with one hand on her shoulder, face unreadable. He was wearing cologne that cost more than my truck payment. He checked his watch twice in the first 5 minutes. I'd never liked Rodney Holt. Not from the first night Patricia brought him home. Margaret had pulled me into the kitchen after dinner that night and said, "Something's wrong with him, Arthur. I can feel it." I told her she was being overprotective. I told her Patricia was a grown woman. I was wrong about that too. The funeral was Saturday morning at Hollywood Cemetery. Already brutal heat by 9 a.m., the kind of humidity that makes your collar stick. Margaret had picked out that plot herself years earlier, right next to her mother, under an old oak tree. Practical woman. She planned everything. About 40 people came. Judge Floyd Caldwell stood in the back with his hat in his hands, looking genuinely broken. He'd known Margaret for 15 years. Pastor Russell Collins read the 23rd Psalm. I stood at the edge of the grave in my black suit and felt like I was watching everything from somewhere far away. Patricia and Rodney showed up 15 minutes late. Patricia wore dark sunglasses the entire service. Rodney checked his watch 3 times in 2 minutes. I counted. After the service, we moved to the fellowship hall at St. Paul's. Church ladies had set up enough food to feed the whole neighborhood. Fried chicken, macaroni, sweet potato pie, sweet tea. The smell of it all made me feel sick. I sat in a corner chair and shook hands and said thank you until the words stopped meaning anything. But I was wearing my hearing aids, and I'd turned them all the way up. I noticed Patricia and Rodney near the punch bowl. Backs to me, heads close together. To anyone watching, they looked like a grieving daughter and her supportive husband. I picked up a flower arrangement nearby and pretended to read the card. I heard every word. When can we get into the accounts? Rodney's voice was low, urgent. After the will reading, Patricia said, "Next Thursday. That's too late." Howard called again this morning. $220,000 by Friday. He doesn't do extensions, Patty. She told him to lower his voice. He didn't. The insurance policy is $1.2 million. Plus the house. We just need your father to sign a power of attorney. One signature. He won't just sign. Everyone signs eventually, Rodney said. You just find the right leverage. I set the flowers down, walked slowly to the exit, nodded to a few people on the way out, climbed into my truck, and sat there with both hands on the steering wheel. $220,000 in gambling debt. My wife wasn't even cold yet, and they were already doing math. My phone buzzed. Dr. George Hartley. That same gut instinct that kept me alive through 2 overseas deployments told me to answer. I pressed the green button. The fellowship hall at St. Paul's was packed by the time we got there from the cemetery. The ladies' auxiliary had set up enough food to feed a small army: fried chicken, collard greens, sweet potato pie, cornbread cut into perfect squares. Smells that used to mean home. That afternoon, they just made my stomach turn. I sat in a folding chair in the corner and let people come to me. Mrs. Henderson from next door squeezed my hand. Old Mr. Carlson from down the street said to call if I needed anything. Judge Floyd Caldwell bent down low and told me Margaret was irreplaceable. I nodded, I shook hands. I said thank you until the words stopped meaning anything. My hearing aids were turned up all the way. Most people assumed I was half deaf. That was fine with me. The truth was I could control the volume. Turn it up to catch a conversation across a room. Turn it down when I needed quiet. That afternoon I had them maxed out. And that's how I heard it. Patricia and Rodney were standing near the punch bowl, maybe 15 feet away, backs to me. To anyone watching, they looked like a grieving daughter and her supportive husband sharing a quiet moment. I picked up a sympathy card from the table next to me and pretended to read it. When can we get into the accounts? Rodney's voice was low but tight, urgent. After the will reading, Patricia said, next Thursday. Thursday is too late. Howard called again this morning, $220,000 by Friday. Patty. He doesn't do payment plans, and you know what happens when he stops asking nicely. Patricia told him to lower his voice. He didn't care. There's the life insurance. $1.2 million. We just need your father to sign over power of attorney. He's confused right now. He won't fight it. I turned the sympathy card over in my hands. Read nothing. Heard everything. What if he won't sign? Patricia asked. Everyone signs eventually. Rodney's voice went flat. You just have to apply the right pressure. I set the card down slowly, stood up, moved toward the exit using my cane more than I needed to. Let people see an old man who could barely hold himself together. Nobody noticed that my hands weren't shaking anymore. Outside, I sat in my truck in the parking lot and stared at the wheel. $220,000 life insurance, power of attorney. Margaret was 3 days in the ground and they were already carving up the house. Then my phone buzzed, Dr. George Hartley's name on the screen. I almost didn't answer. I just buried my wife and found out my daughter was circling like a vulture. But something in my gut said pick up. Same instinct that kept me alive through 24 years of Air Force service. 2 deployments. Equipment failures at altitude that should have killed me. You learn to trust that voice. I hit the green button. Arthur. His voice was different, tight in a way I'd never heard from George Hartley in 12 years. I need you to come to my office right now. There's something in Margaret's blood work that doesn't add up. A pause. Come alone. Don't say a word to your daughter or her husband. Another pause, longer this time. Your life may depend on this. I sat there for a second, holding the phone. I'm on my way, I said. The medical building was on the east side of town, small brick place near the hospital. I parked in the handicapped spot, veteran plates, and walked in. The waiting room was empty. Reception desk, dark. Just a light on behind the door marked private. I pushed through without knocking. George was at his desk, but he wasn't alone. A man stood by the window, tall, broad shoulders, gray suit, weathered face. The kind of face that spent years watching people lie and stopped being surprised by it. Arthur, this is Detective Earl Mercer, George said. He stood up. His hands were trembling. Major crimes unit? Major crimes. I looked at Mercer. He crossed the room and shook my hand, said he was sorry for my loss. Then he said they needed to show me something. George slid a folder across the desk. Lab reports, charts, numbers I didn't understand. But one word was circled in red at the top of the page. Digoxin. Margaret was on digoxin, I said. You prescribed it 2 years ago. For her blood pressure. That's right. George pulled out a second sheet. I prescribed 0.25 milligrams once daily, standard maintenance dose. The therapeutic range in the bloodstream. The safe zone is 0.5 to 2 nanograms per milliliter. Mercer leaned forward and pointed to a number circled in red. Margaret's level when she died was 8.3. The room went cold. Even with the Virginia heat sitting outside those windows, I felt it go cold. That's 4 to 5 times the safe level, George said. His voice was quiet, careful, like he was delivering something fragile and didn't want it to break before I understood it. At those concentrations, digoxin stops regulating the heart. It destroys it. But before that happens, weeks before, sometimes months, it mimics other conditions. Fatigue, confusion, nausea, loss of coordination. Trouble remembering things. I thought about Margaret grabbing the kitchen counter, Margaret not remembering what day it was, Margaret telling me the tea tasted wrong, bitter and sweet at the same time, like something was being covered up. I told her she was imagining things. Someone was doing this slowly, Mercer said, small amounts over time, designed to look like natural decline. He let that sit for a second. Designed to look exactly like what the ER doctors called it. I looked at him straight. Who? George opened his desk drawer and set a leather-bound journal on the desk between us. Margaret's handwriting. Small, precise, the handwriting of a woman who'd managed Judge Caldwell's accounts for 15 years without a single error. I recognized it before I even touched it. He opened it to a marked page. January 12th, tea tastes off again. Patricia brought chamomile from that shop she likes. February 3rd, medication has a strange taste. Metallic, will mention to Dr. H. March 18th, Patricia visits every Sunday now, always brings tea. Something feels wrong, but I can't name it. April 2nd, dizzy, after Patricia left. Slept 14 hours, she knew. She didn't want to believe it, but she wrote it down anyway, every detail, because that's who Margaret was. She never let the truth disappear just because it hurt. I put the journal down and looked at Mercer. Tell me everything. Mercer laid out pharmacy receipts across George's desk like a card dealer showing a losing hand. CVS on West Broad Street, Walgreens on Patterson Avenue, Rite Aid in Carytown, 7 refills of Margaret's digoxin prescription, he said, 8 months, 3 different pharmacies. He pointed at each receipt, moving left to right, all under Patricia Holt's name. I stared at the dates. February, March, April, May. The months Margaret had been fading right in front of me. Standard protocol is 1 refill every 3 months, Mercer said. 4 refills a year, not 7. And not spread across 3 different locations. I already understood why 3 pharmacies. You don't need to explain that kind of math to a man who spent 24 years in the military. One pharmacist might notice. One might flag it, call the prescribing doctor, ask questions. But split it across 3 different locations in 3 different neighborhoods. Nobody sees the pattern. Nobody connects the dots. The cold calculation of it hit me harder than anything else in that room. George pulled out another folder, bank statements. A lot of them. 2 years ago, he said, Margaret came to me, not about her health, about money. She'd found discrepancies in your joint savings account. He pushed the statements across the desk. $90,000. Gone. Small withdrawals at first, then larger ones, authorization forms with Margaret's signature, but Margaret recognized her own handwriting. These were forgeries. I remembered that morning. Margaret at the kitchen table with bank statements spread out like a crime scene. The look on her face when she pushed them toward me. Eugene, come look at this. She never called me Eugene unless something was seriously wrong. We'd confronted Patricia that same afternoon, right there in our living room. Patricia cried until her mascara ran down her face. Said Rodney had gotten into gambling trouble, that men had threatened him, that she didn't know what to do. Margaret had pulled her close and said, why didn't you come to us? Said, we'll get through this together. Margaret used her inheritance, money her mother had left her, to cover every dollar, $90,000, gone in an afternoon to save our daughter from her husband's mess. Patricia had promised it would never happen again. 12 months ago, Mercer continued, it happened again. This time, $180,000 from Margaret's personal investment account, money she'd inherited from her father. Savings she'd built over 30 years. He tapped the statements, same method, forged authorization forms, same handwriting. I felt something shift in my chest. Not surprise, worse than surprise, recognition, like a part of me had already known and had been working very hard not to look at it. Margaret called Judge Caldwell, George said quietly. She told him she was filing criminal charges this time, embezzlement, forgery, fraud. He paused. That was 8 months ago. Same month the poisoning started. I sat with that for a second. The timing was exact. Margaret decides to stop protecting Patricia from consequences. Picks up the phone, tells her employer she's done looking the other way. And within weeks, someone starts adding digoxin to her tea every Sunday afternoon. The stolen money, I said. Where did it go? Mercer opened a third folder. A photograph, a small house in Arlington, brick front, nice neighborhood. A woman standing on the porch, young, maybe late 20s, blonde. Rodney had a mistress, he said. He used $140,000 of the stolen money to buy that house. Put it in her name. He let me look at the photo for a moment. The remaining $130,000 went toward partially paying down the gambling debt. He still owed Howard Russo $220,000. The deadline was this Friday. I set the photo down. Patricia had killed her mother for a man who was already buying a house for someone else. She didn't know any of it. She'd stolen. She'd poisoned. She'd watched her mother decline week by week over 8 months of Sunday visits, and the man she'd done it all for was already planning his exit. "What do you need from me?" I said. Mercer reached into his jacket and set a small black device on the desk. Size of a lighter, a small red light on the side. "They'll come to the house," he said, "tonight or tomorrow. They need you to sign over power of attorney before they can access Margaret's accounts or the insurance payout. They'll bring a lawyer. They'll be prepared." He pushed the recorder toward me. "But they think you're a confused, grieving old man who can barely remember what day it is. Let them keep thinking that. You want me to wear a wire. I want you to have a conversation in your own home. Let them talk. Let them explain the documents. If you can get them to mention Margaret, the money, the medication, anything that connects them to what happened, that's what we need. Evidence alone isn't always enough. A good defense attorney can argue the pharmacy records were a daughter helping a forgetful mother manage prescriptions. They can argue the financial transfers were authorized. We need them to incriminate themselves on record. I picked up the device. It was lighter than I expected. "My team will be in a surveillance van 1 block north," Mercer said. "You'll have a panic word, say Margaret's roses in any sentence, and we come through that door inside 60 seconds. He looked at me steadily. "You will not be alone." I thought about Margaret's journal, about April 2nd dizzy after Patricia left, about all the Sundays Patricia had sat at our kitchen table drinking coffee and making small talk while Margaret got weaker, and I told myself it was just age. I slipped the recorder into my shirt pocket. "I've handled worse than my own living room," I said. Mercer nodded. He didn't argue. But before I stood up, he said one more thing. "Mr. Norwood, they've already taken 1 life. Don't forget what you're dealing with." I didn't forget. I drove home anyway. 2 blocks from the house I saw the front door standing open. Margaret's blue door, the one with the brass knocker she'd picked out at a shop in Williamsburg 20 years ago, halfway open in the fading evening light. The porch light was off. I always left it on. I pulled into the driveway and killed the engine, sat for a second. Every instinct from 24 years of service said call for backup. Don't enter alone. Treat this like the hostile situation it clearly is. But Mercer's voice was in my head. Let them talk. Get everything on record. I got out slowly, gripped my cane, and pushed the door open the rest of the way. The living room stopped me cold. Couch cushions slashed open. Stuffing scattered across the hardwood Margaret had refinished herself 3 summers ago. Books swept off the shelves, her mystery novels, my engineering manuals, the photo albums we'd kept for 37 years. Margaret's porcelain figurines smashed across the coffee table. The shepherdess from Charleston. The bluebirds from a trip we took to Asheville for our 30th anniversary. 3 decades of small, careful things, broken from down the hall, metal on metal. The sharp crack of something being pried. I moved slowly, cane tapping a steady rhythm, deliberate. Let them hear me coming. In the bedroom doorway, I stopped. Rodney was on his knees in front of the wall safe behind Margaret's dresser, a crowbar jammed into the seam, sweating through his polo shirt. Patricia stood at the dresser going through the bottom drawer, where we kept the important papers, birth certificates, the deed to the house, insurance policies. They were so focused, they didn't hear me until I cleared my throat. Rodney spun around with the crowbar raised. Patricia's hand flew to her chest. 3 seconds of nobody moving. Then Rodney lowered the crowbar and manufactured a smile. "Arthur? God, you scared us." He spread his hands like he was explaining something reasonable. "We're protecting the assets. Howard Russo's people have been watching the house. We needed to secure the cash before they send someone over." I let my shoulders drop, let my voice go thin and uncertain. I thought someone was breaking in. No, Patricia crossed to me. Her voice was honey. "We tried calling, Daddy. You didn't answer." We were so worried. She'd never called me Daddy before, always Dad or just Arthur when she was angry. I blinked slowly. I was at Dr. Hartley's office. Something about Margaret's blood work. I don't remember what he said exactly. Everything's so foggy. They exchanged a look, quick and sharp, over in less than a second. Of course it is, Patricia said. She took my arm and steered me gently toward the door. You've been through so much. Why don't you rest? Trevor and I will. Rodney and I will take care of everything. Will you stay? I let hope into my voice. Made myself sound like a man who was afraid of the dark and didn't want to admit it. I don't want to be in this house alone. We're not going anywhere. Patricia said, we're family. I lay in the guest room with the door closed and the lights off and listened to my house. Old houses talk if you know how to listen. This one was built in 1892 original construction. Plaster walls, hardwood floors that creaked in patterns I'd memorized over 37 years. I knew which board outside the guest room groaned when you stepped on the left side. I knew the guest bathroom pipes knocked twice before the hot water came through. I knew the kitchen floorboards popped in a sequence 3 short, 1 long when someone walked from the stove to the sink. I lay on my back and tracked them through the house by sound. Kitchen, hallway, living room, back to the bedroom. Their voices traveled through the thin walls, low and urgent, words coming in and out of range. I kept my breathing slow and even, in through the nose, out through barely parted lips. The breathing of a man deep under grief and exhaustion. The breathing of a man who was no threat to anyone. Just after midnight, footsteps stopped outside my door. The knob turned slowly. Testing. The door opened with the small squeak it always made. I'd been meaning to oil those hinges for 2 years. Margaret had reminded me twice. A bar of hallway light fell across the foot of the bed. I kept my face slack, body still, eyes closed. Someone stood in the doorway for a long time. He's out. Patricia's whisper, barely audible. Rodney's voice from just behind her in the hallway, quiet and flat. Good. Keep him that way tonight. We need him clear-headed tomorrow when the lawyer gets here. A pause after he signs. Rodney said, we handle the rest. Patricia said nothing. He's old, Rodney said. Old people have accidents, falls, heart attacks. Nobody asks questions. The door clicked shut. Their footsteps moved back down the hall. A door closed, then silence. I lay in the dark and didn't move. My daughter had just stood in my doorway while her husband discussed how I was going to die. Discussed it the way you'd discuss changing a tire. Flat, practical, no more weight than that. I waited 20 minutes. Then I slid the burner phone Mercer had given me from under the pillow and typed with my thumbs in the dark. They're planning it for after I sign tomorrow. Just heard Rodney say old people have accidents, falls, heart attacks, all on the recorder. Mercer's response came in under a minute. Hold position. Lawyer arrives 9 a.m. Let the meeting start. We need them to connect themselves to Margaret on tape. You're doing fine. Sunrise in 4 hours. I put the phone back under the pillow and stared at the ceiling fan, turning slow circles in the dark. 4 hours. I'd spent longer than that waiting in the dark before. I knew how to wait. Justice doesn't bring anyone back, but silence lets them take everything that's left. Would you have done what Arthur did? Would you have taken in that baby? Drop a comment, tell me where you're watching from and what you think. And if this one hit close to home, share it. Someone out there needs to hear it.